Well, good morning, everyone. We really appreciate you all joining us today. Thank you for making the trip out here for those of you who are in person. I'm Mark Wilterding, SVP of Global Finance and the Head of Investor Relations, and along with the team, had a role in putting today together, and really excited for you to be here for the 2025 Edwards Lifesciences Investor Conference. We've got a great session planned for you today. In addition to the executive leadership team that we have in person who will be presenting, we've got a number of physician cameos, and we'll also talk more about our product portfolio in detail and the progress we're making on a number of clinical trials. For those of you who are online, please note the presentation slides have been uploaded, and so they are currently available on our investor relations website. Just two quick items. Please take a minute to get familiar with this slide here behind me. During the event, we will be making some forward-looking statements. It is possible that actual results can differ from our expectations. For more information, you can find detail on our website on the latest SEC filings as well. The other thing I'd highlight here are the non-GAAP financial measures regarding our performance. Our SEC filings, along with the reconciliations of any non-GAAP financial measures utilized to the most comparable GAAP measures, are available also on our website at ir.edwards.com. With that, I want to introduce a really special video. One of the best parts of my job, I think, is highlighting just what makes this company so special. The physician partnerships we have, the people at the organization, and the patients that we help. And I think the team that helped put this video together did a really nice job of capturing that.
There was a time where we had to look at patients and say, "I'm sorry, there's nothing more we can do for you." But now we can offer them options, all because someone dared to dream what was possible.
For over a half century, Edwards has had a vision and a mission to pioneer new and innovative therapies, developing categories of therapies for all patients with structural heart disease.
Whenever I'm doing a procedure, I know that there are at least two devices ahead of me, and they're addressing problems I haven't even thought about.
We work together side by side, shoulder to shoulder, and we test, they revise, we test, they revise, and it gets better and better over time.
That partnership, I think, is what physicians really yearn for, to be able to provide even better care for our patients.
There is no company that's made that level of commitment over the course of such a long time, bridging from surgery to transcatheter aortic valve, now mitral and tricuspid valve, and in the future, new heart failure therapies.
I'm really excited about what's still to come.
Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm very excited about, having all of you. We value your interest in the company. We have very exciting topics to discuss today. One is about, how we are going to talk about, how special we are as a company, the great performance we are on track to have in 2025, and our vision for 2026 and beyond. We have a very unique strategy in medtech with a clear vision around three key elements. We are now solely focusing on structural heart, and we are able to leverage, the expertise and commitment of our 16,000 employees globally to impact patient care, solely focusing on structural heart disease. We are solving large and very complex needs, with many patients having no other solutions today. And what we like to do, what we aim to do always, is to go first. When we go first, we create the path. And when we do so, patient benefits and innovation accelerates. And we have seen that across surgical, across TAVR, and across so many other fields, when we enter, first. So this strategy is working. Today, we are the global leader in structural heart. We are one of the fastest large-cap medtech companies in the world. But that's today. In my mind, what's more important is where we are going. And I believe we are well positioned to deliver sustained and differentiated growth in the foreseeable future. I have only one slide looking back, and I can tell you I'm very proud of the team and all of the accomplishments we have achieved in 2025. We have delivered very significant goals. Many of them will have lasting impacts. So, for instance, 2 practice-changing evidence. Early TAVR. Early TAVR is not just a study. Early TAVR is going to change the path for all aortic stenosis patients in the next decade. The 7-year PARTNER 3, for instance, which is setting a new benchmark, including TAVR durability. We launched not just 1, but 2 of the world's first catheter-based replacement valve for mitral and tricuspid, SAPIEN M3 and EVOQUE. And we are continuing to be a top investors on our strategy. We are investing more than $1 billion a year in R&D while delivering profitable growth. So financially, I'm very pleased about where we are for 2025. We are on track to deliver on a high end of the original guidance of 8-10 that we gave you in December 2024. And we are on track to exceed our original EPS guidance from December 2024. So clearly, we are exiting the year strong, and this gives us confidence for 2026 and beyond. Our focus on structural heart gives us the opportunity to deploy our strategy with speed and agility. And I love this strategy. I love the fact that all what we have done in the past years to be solely focusing on structural heart disease. And we are going to apply this speed and agility across our core platforms, TAVR, surgical, and TMTT, where we still see a large opportunities with large unmet patient needs. So we are going to continue to invest and bring next-gen innovations, next-gen evidence. But we are also expanding our portfolio across structural heart with novel therapies for patients who have currently no other options. And the result of this very unique strategy is, as Edwards leads, in our mind, everybody benefits. So let me explain. Physicians have access to best innovation on a regular basis. Patient care and patient lives are transformed with our therapy. Our employees are part of something special, something meaningful, something mission-driven. And overall, we impact the practice of medicine, create value, and saving at the same time for the healthcare systems and taxpayers. So how do we do this? We know there is plenty of patients in need, more than 20 million, with very diverse needs. So we will continue to bring novel and differentiated innovation and world-class evidence to transform care for TAVR, TMTT surgical, TAVR AR, and heart failure. But in addition, a concept which is very exciting. We are leveraging our 65 years of valve leadership to pioneer therapies for the many patient groups currently unaddressed. What I mean by unaddressed, they have no options today. And I want to give you some examples. Patient with asymptomatic AS, for instance. Patient with mitral. patients with tricuspid or AR in need of a transcatheter replacement. Each one of these unaddressed patient groups, they represent a very large opportunity. It is an opportunity for sure for the patient. It is also an opportunity for us as a company. And we are the only company committed to deliver first-of-its-kind innovation for all of these patients. We know it is not easy, but this is what we like to do. Tackling big issues, solving them, and this is clearly the result of our 65 years of leadership and our long-term commitment. Later today, you are going to hear from our business leaders. In TAVR, we have best-in-class technologies. We have practice-changing evidence. And all of that together, it is enabling a new era of proactive disease management. And Dan is going to talk about that. In TMTT, we are now, have a full portfolio. And this is enabling personalized care for this mitral and tricuspid patient. Daveen is going to talk about that. And in surgical, our leading RESILIA innovation are transforming patient lives globally, and YJ is going to talk about that later. In my mind, our core businesses are incredible. They are the heart of a company. They are set for long-term success, and we have so many catalysts, and you are going to see some later today. At the same time, we are very committed to emerging opportunities in structural heart, reaching more patients, complementing our core, and all of that is clearly a natural progression for the company. TAVR AR, we are developing new therapy for these patients who have limited options or almost no options today. IHFM, we are establishing here a new standard of care with the patient at the center of the care management. And we are going to stop here because there are many other structural heart patients in need today. So we are going to continue to invest and bring therapies for these heart failure patients. Now, let me transition to financial outlook. I already talked about 2025 and how strong of a year it is. And 2026 is set to be another very successful year. What I like about the company today, it is also not depending about one business. It is led by 3 core businesses, diversified sources of growth across TAVR, mitral, tricuspid, and surgical. So in 2026, we expect sales growth 8 to 10%, or $6.4 to $6.6 billion. We are going to continue investing a high-level investment in innovation, while at the same time improving our R&D and SG&A ratio. About 100 basis points of margin expansion, very much aligned with the commitment we made last year at the investor conference, with leverage EPS growth of 11% at the midpoint of 280 to 295, including the JenaValve planned acquisition in 2026. So clearly, all of these metrics together are setting the stage for having another year of distinguished performance. And starting in 2026, our strategy will result in these many catalysts across our different businesses. I'm sure you look at this one and you are very excited like we are. Within the next 3 years, we are going to launch many next-gen SAPIEN, next-gen EVOQUE, next-gen Pascal, next-gen M3, and more. But in addition, I'm very confident in our ability to pioneer new therapies to the many patient groups I introduced earlier, the one that have no other options today, the ones who are unaddressed. Or simply said, we are creating new markets. So let me elaborate. TAVR for asymptomatic patients. TAVR for moderate patients. TAVR for AR patients. So 3 big catalysts in TAVR. Transcatheter tricuspid valve. Surgical tricuspid valve. Transcatheter mitral valve. Transcatheter therapies for heart failure. And we are going to briefly talk about that today, later in the morning. So clearly, many near-term catalysts across the company, creating new options for patients. And all of these catalysts basically will result, beyond 2026 in TAVR growing between mid to high single digit, TMTT having an increased contribution to the company growth, reaching $2 billion by 2030, and having growth potential beyond 2030, surgical mid-single digit, and structural heart failure, a number of technologies, together with TAVR AR, having an increased contribution to growth, beyond, 2026, obviously. This gives us confidence that we will be able to target 10% average annual total company growth beyond, 2026. Obviously, some variability based on the timing of catalysts, from years to years, and leverage EPS, like in 2026. I feel like, we are very well positioned as a large cap medtech company with plenty of opportunities, creating long-term, sustainable, differentiated, profitable growth. In summary, we are very confident in our strategy. Solely focusing on structural heart disease, a decision we made, about 2 years ago. We are exiting 2025 with distinguished performance, enhanced leadership. Near term, so what I mean by near term is the next 3 to 4 years, our catalysts in TAVR, TMTT, surgical, will provide novel solution for the large and growing needs of millions of patients. And we are confident we will be able to maintain our distinguished performance. Longer term between our... Thank you. So longer term between our core innovation, TAVR, surgical, and TMTT, and our expanded opportunity, we expect sustainable growth and value creation. All of this is possible with the amazing employees across the company, 16,000 employees, and the leadership of our executive team. We recently added a few leaders on the leadership team, having in mind a couple of things. Speed of innovation, but also focusing on therapy platforms. We want to accelerate and advance patient access globally. We truly work as a team, and we have one mission: patient care with speed and agility. So this is the agenda for today. You're going to have a very comprehensive overview of the company and all of the opportunities ahead of us. With that, I'm going to pass the mic to Dan, who is leading our TAVR business beautifully. Dan?
Thanks, Bernard.
Back to you.
I had seen the statistic, 1 in 10 people who don't get treatment within the first 5 weeks may not survive. It's like, oh my gosh, I got to get in and get this done. So I had the TAVR as quickly as we could.
We often waited for symptoms. What we learned from the early TAVR trial is that there's no benefit of waiting.
We now have a very robust body of evidence we can finally take the subjective assessment of symptoms off the table in determining whether or not to treat these patients.
When I identify a patient with aortic stenosis, even if they're asymptomatic, I don't wait. I refer them to our heart team.
We want to see those patients sooner rather than later, so that allows them to move through the hospital system much more quickly and potentially reduces the risk of heart failure hospitalizations.
At 7 years, valve function and durability were still excellent and similar in both groups.
My call to action for any patient with severe aortic stenosis is early referral, regardless of symptoms, and where appropriate, timely intervention.
Well, it's certainly an exciting time for TAVR. And as we enter this new era of proactive disease management, we're really well positioned for growth. The shift is underpinned by unparalleled evidence, which now importantly includes proven long-term durability. We're expanding access to patients with important new indications, for example, like asymptomatic patients. And we have the opportunity to learn how TAVR can change the lives and improve the lives further upstream in its application in moderate disease. All of it made possible, and only made possible, by Edwards' differentiated valve platforms. And we will continue to differentiate and continue to expand with our really exciting innovation pipeline. I'll take a moment also just to reflect on the last 12 months. And there's been a few important moments in our strategy. We've had asymptomatic indications approved in both the United States and in Europe. Those indications, along with really important and meaningful evidence, have caused a shift, a real shift, and an important movement in TAVR guidelines. And also there's an evolution in policy that is happening. We had really, really important data presented at TCT with a PARTNER 3 7-year long-term follow-up. And that data was presented and simultaneously published. And our flagship platform, SAPIEN 3 Ultra RESILIA, continues to roll out globally and help extend our leadership position, all leading to a positive financial results for 2025. And we're on track to deliver 7 to 8% year-over-year growth. And there has been definitively a renewed focus in TAVR globally. And that is causing a renewed focus in growth in the market globally. I've been at this is my 16th year working with the TAVR therapy, and I don't recall a 12-month period where TAVR has been so consistently in the news for all the right reasons. Every podium around the world, new evidence, sub-analyses, both clinical and economic. We've seen updates in guidelines. We've seen expert consensus documents presented and published, all leading to a very extraordinary amplification from podiums, publications around the world. And perhaps none more important data presented than at TCT this year in October. Late-breaking clinical trial session sponsored by the New England Journal of Medicine. The long-term data from PARTNER 3 low-risk trial, the 7-year follow-up. And this was highly anticipated for two reasons. The first is the 5 to 7 year period is often referred to as a window of vulnerability for bioprosthetic valves. If there is going to be a durability signal, if there's going to be a durability challenge with a bioprosthetic valve, it's going to happen in this period. Second is this is the very, very first trial, whether it be for a surgical valve or a transcatheter valve, where patients was serially followed with echocardiography. And more importantly, independently core lab adjudicated to contemporary definitions of VARC3 for valve performance and durability measures. The very, very first time. And the results were so reassuring and positive for patients and physicians, not just because there was equivalence in long-term outcomes between TAVR and surgery, but a new benchmark has been set for valve performance and durability performance over the longer term. The results for valve performance in this trial were excellent across every measure, and that sets a new benchmark in transcatheter valve performance. And those results are particularly reassuring because new evidence, not only with our early TAVR trial, but including our early TAVR trial, is suggesting that there is a significant patient benefit by treating earlier in the disease pathway. When patients are treated before the onset of symptoms, there is a superior and significant clinical benefit. This is challenging everything that we know about clinical surveillance as a standard of care. You know, one of the most important things that we're learning is this disease is unpredictable. You cannot predict the progression of this disease. Highly unpredictable, and there's a high risk, as we all know, of not treating, but there's a high risk of waiting. So time is definitely not the friend of a severe aortic stenosis patient. And we're learning that it's not just the clinical benefit. We're learning that by waiting, there's an economic tax. Or to put more positively, there's an economic benefit for treating patients earlier in the disease progression pathway. It is now clearer that patients do better clinically when treated early, but also if we wait while that heart, the left ventricle, is working harder and harder to deliver oxygenated blood to vital organs, if we wait, that just gives the opportunity for the patient to progress into acute valve syndrome, to have cardiac damage. And with delayed treatment, you can save a life. But you're also going to have more complications, you're going to spend more days in hospital, and you're going to have a higher opportunity to have repeat hospitalizations due to heart failure. And all of that adds up to real dollars and cents at the point of care, both at the healthcare system and at the hospital level. And this is really important information that is emerging, that there is not only a clinical benefit, but an economic benefit for treating earlier in the pathway. You know, it's our strategy. It's been our committed strategy. It's our leadership strategy of being committed to generating very, very high quality levels of evidence. And that evidence generation, consistent evidence generation, has led not only to new indications, differentiated indications, but has also led to clinical confidence. And that clinical confidence and indication expansion is leading to guideline evolution. And we talked about it before, but what's happening now is probably the greatest shift in valvular guidelines than has been seen in over 10 years. Specifically, we saw in 2025 the American Society of Echocardiography, who is typically very passive in reporting the news. They've made a clear shift, particularly for when critical findings like severe aortic stenosis are noted, for very clear and urgent communication. This is really different. In their words, communication should be within minutes so that patients can receive timely access to care. Perhaps one of the biggest changes we've seen is in Europe, where the European Society of Cardiology and the European Association of Cardiothoracic Surgeons have made a number of significant advances with their guideline update, not just reducing their Class 1 recommendation for TAVR to the age of 70, but most importantly, if severe aortic stenosis is confirmed by echocardiography, refer for treatment evaluation. Refer immediately, independently of symptoms and independently of heart function. And this is a huge shift. This is a really, really important shift. And this has been confirmed also with the most recent publication at TCT on the global expert consensus, which validates all this. These are the people who do the procedure every day, the referring cardiologists who are involved in referring these patients every day, surgeons who are involved in the procedure every single day, doubling down on these guideline updates and perhaps suggesting an even greater sense of urgency for patients with severe aortic stenosis. What does it mean for the patient? Well, today, current standard of care of clinical surveillance and watchful waiting is a complicated one. Patients bounce around the system. Multiple HCP visits in primary care and in specialty care, going in for heart team evaluations, physicians trying to assess, is now the right time? What is happening with the progression of the disease? What are your symptoms? How bad are your symptoms? Maybe we should do more imaging, CT, echocardiography. Maybe let's have another look. All of this is time. It's normally more than 6 months, often more than a year, and that's just in the United States. Outside the United States, longer. All representing a significant barrier for the patient to get timely access to care. So the new guidelines, they aim to simplify this and reshape the pathway, making it very black and white, very easy. If severe aortic stenosis is confirmed by echocardiography, refer for treatment immediately. And if there is not a good reason not to treat and treat with urgency, all supported now by guidelines and, importantly, by a quality metric defined by the American Heart Association of time to diagnosis to discharge home in less than 90 days. Ambitious but possible. And this is changing the way that we look at the treatment of aortic stenosis. This is what proactive disease management looks like. Now, the education of this, the democratization of this, it takes time. Right? This is new. This is challenging dogma for over 50 years that we should be watchfully waiting and waiting for symptom determination. This is all being challenged. But it's new. And what certainly would help accelerate the adoption, particularly in the United States, is if the coverage policy was aligned to the indications and the guidelines. Today, that's not the case for the TAVR NCD. There is an urgent need to modernize the NCD, and the good news is this is a really high priority for CMS. And now that everyone is back at work, and assuming it takes the normal pathway and timeline of up to 12 months, assuming that it gets opened imminently, then we can look forward to an updated NCD in the United States before the end of 2026, which kind of lines up when the ACC and the AHA will be updating their valvular guidelines in the fourth quarter of 2026. So there are so many opportunities within severe aortic stenosis. We have new evidence, important evidence. We have new indications. We have evolving guidelines, all representing independent sources of growth. But at TCT next year, we're anticipating the data from the PROGRESS trial. And this data is going to help us learn more about how TAVR might benefit patients with moderate disease. And guess what? We're going to have the opportunity for more evidence generation, potential for more indication expansion and access to patients. And this creates another cycle and another layer of growth opportunity as we work through that. It's an exciting time. None of it possible. Not the evidence, not the indications, certainly not the clinical confidence and the evolution of guidelines. None of it is possible without standing on the shoulders of outstanding innovation. And we definitively have set the global benchmark there with our Sapien platform. And we will continue to evolve and advance our innovation pipeline to meet the needs of patients and clinicians as we go through this new era of proactive disease management, which will amplify needs around lifetime management as we treat earlier and younger. Today, our flagship platform, Sapien 3 Ultra with Resilia, is definitely the global benchmark, not just for early outcomes, but now proven long-term outcomes and proven durability. And by design, it is the only platform that facilitates and provides a clear path for future interventions like valve-in-valve, like coronary reaccess, if patients need, as we treat earlier in the pathway and younger in age. It really sets a high bar, and that bar gets higher and higher, but we're so excited about our next generation platform, which is Sapien X4. Now, the challenge for Sapien X4 is Sapien 3 UR. That bar is really, really high. But Sapien X4 offers the opportunity to completely change the game with variable valve sizing. This is entering into the foray of personalized sizing for each patient, personalized valve solutions for each patient. Not only, there are many new features associated with this valve platform that brings ease of use dimensions for physicians. For example, really simplified valve orientation or commissure alignment, or on-balloon delivery, or improved vascular access options with the platform. It's super exciting. The innovation process never stops. And in fact, it accelerates when you go into clinic. That's when you really start to learn. And our engineers and talented team have already identified areas of opportunity to enhance this platform. We're going to take the opportunity to make a couple of those enhancements. We think that that's going to be meaningful. We're working through the details of that, but it probably require some confirmatory clinical work in addition to the Alliance trial, and we anticipate that we'll get that done in 2026. So if we look ahead with everything, with the evidence, with indication expansion, with guideline evolution, we feel really good about 2026 and the guidance we're setting for 6 to 8%. But it's not just for 2026. The Sapien platform is the only platform proven to enable proactive disease management. Unmatched clinical evidence, differentiated indications, clinical confidence amongst the clinical community that is driving updates at a rapid pace within the guidelines and within coverage policy, and the potential to even expand access further as we go further upstream with moderate, and the learnings that we're going to have with the Progress trial in 2026. All of this providing catalysts to support mid to high single-digit growth, not just in 2026, but beyond that period and across the planned horizon for the mid to long term. All the ingredients are there for sustained growth in TAVR. And I sure hope that you share my confidence in this therapy and 2026 and beyond as we go into this new era of proactive disease management. Thank you, and I'll hand over to my friend and colleague, Daveen Chopra.
In my clinical practice, we see a broad range of anatomy in patients with mitral and tricuspid valve disease.
This is a prevalent population of patients that is unserved by current therapies. One size does not fit all. So we need to have multiple devices to make the best choices for individual patients.
What's remarkable about Edwards TMTT is the portfolio of treatments available.
It's about the partnership, because with their portfolio of products, they can help us work towards which device is going to be best for their anatomy.
The options that are available now give us the luxury of using the right device for the right patient.
So we are so excited to be able to have these new tools that we can introduce to our patient community.
With Evoke and the advent of the SAPIEN M3 system, we are at the cusp of the second large wave of treating patients with mitral and tricuspid valve disease.
Good morning, good morning. I think as we heard in the video, there are millions of patients out there with mitral and tricuspid disease. These are patients that are really underserved by today's medical therapies of surgery or other kinds of medicine. The vast majority of these patients, they're untreated. They're looking for options. And a lot of these patients, they can't live the life that they want. They can't do the things that are important to them. They can't play with their grandkids, take care of themselves. They're looking for options. They're looking for other solutions. And what we see is that many of these patients have a huge diversity in anatomies and clinical presentations. They require different types of devices, different types of therapy options to most optimally treat these patients. And I think this is where the Edwards strategy, our portfolio strategy in TMTT of having a repair and replacement device for each the mitral and tricuspid valve can really meet their needs and is really critical. It's critical not only to treat the maximum number of patients, but it's really unique to Edwards. It is unique to Edwards to have this portfolio of repair and replacement. And if you think about each product in the product portfolio, especially those new areas of mitral and tricuspid replacement, we're really meeting the needs of these unaddressed patients, right? Bernard talked earlier about these groups of unaddressed patients that are looking for new therapies, and that's how we see mitral and tricuspid replacement and really helping each of these reach their needs. And each of these therapies on their own really brings a lot of value to the healthcare system. It brings values to patients, to physicians, to the healthcare systems, and obviously to Edwards as well. And the way that this value is realized is that ultimately, if you look at the values I was considering, we're with having a portfolio of technology, we can now treat more patients. We have products that can treat more anatomies, so we can ultimately treat a larger number of patients, number one. Number two, we now allows us to have personalized therapy selection leading to better clinical outcomes. If you have the right product for the right patient, we believe you're going to get a better clinical outcomes. It's better for patients, better for physicians, etc. And finally, third, when you get better clinical outcomes at a heart team, the referral physicians see it. The patient community sees it. And as a result, you start getting an increasing number of referrals because you're seeing better results. And this grows the overall kind of opportunity for more patients to be treated. And this kind of strategy, it aligns very much with what we're trying to do in Edwards TMTT to create enduring leadership. And what I mean about leadership, it's more than market share. It's about leading in how we work with ourselves, with the governments out there, the leading key opinion leaders, reimbursement agencies, having a leadership spot with the entire community on the entire ecosystem. And that's important to us. An example is we're already seeing this today, for instance, in tricuspid in Europe, right? Where we've had our portfolio of repair and replacement now for several years, and we believe that we are very much in the leadership situation in working with the entire community for tricuspid in Europe right now. And so how do we realize this opportunity for each therapy in the portfolio? How do we ensure that we can really get this access to the maximum number of patients? It really depends on implementing the Edwards therapy development model. This is a model that we've been doing for 15 years in TAVR. And how do we create a new therapy and bring it out to tens, hundreds of thousands of patients around the world? And we've been implementing this very well, and this comprehensive therapy development activities are what we're trying to implement here in TMTT. Whether you're talking about new innovation iterations, new clinical evidence, right? We just heard about that from Dan. Continuous procedural development, improving reimbursement. Those are all things that we are in the process of doing for each of the TMTT therapies to ensure ultimately, right, the goal of all this is to ensure ultimately that we can increase patient access so the most possible patients can be treated with these innovations. So first, let's dive a little bit into tricuspid and see what's going on there. I think, as you all know, tricuspid treatment is relatively new. Just a few years ago, tricuspid treatment had very, very few options, right, and no transcatheter options. And what we're seeing is a transformation in the treatment of patients. We're seeing patients' lives drastically improved in an amazing way with tricuspid transcatheter therapies. And for us, as you know, we have two different solutions. We have our Pascal tricuspid solution on the right, which really we believe offers a differentiated tier results. And on the left, we obviously have our Evoque product, which we think can consistently eliminate tricuspid regurgitation in patients. So let's first hear a little bit more about Evoque and the current clinical data.
Evoque tricuspid valve replacement virtually abolishes tricuspid regurgitation.
The collective evidence shows us that this device is so efficacious, so consistent.
The TRISCEND II trial convincingly showed that patients who were treated with Evoque clearly did much better compared to patients treated with medical therapy alone.
At 18 months, we now see less heart failure hospitalizations. So that positive signal with respect to heart clinical endpoints is extremely important for the community.
With the real-life data that we have from the STS-TVT registry, we see similar and perhaps better safety outcomes, specifically in terms of reducing bleeding complications and pacemaker implantation rates, and very significant improvements in quality of life and reduction in tricuspid regurgitation.
They feel better, they're taking less medication, spending more time with their family, and enjoying their life.
This device, I think, has generalizability and is really growing in acceptance.
So this tells me that we are going to dramatically increase the number of patients that we will be treating with this technology.
As you just heard, there's a lot of new compelling evidence on Evoque that's really driving broader adoption. Two specific studies were kind of mentioned in that video. The first was a follow-up on our TRISCEND II pivotal randomized study. In a trial that was never designed to show a hard endpoint benefit, this trial showed at 18 months that hard endpoint benefit for Evoque, a statistically significant reduction in heart failure hospitalizations in the most severe TR patients. Fantastic to see that progression, that over time we're starting to see the benefits of TR elimination that improve over time. Second trial was actually a real-world registry, so large-scale real-world post-market registry, the STS-TVT registry, in over 1,000 patients, in not just centers that did it, that used the product in the pre-market trial, but now inexperienced centers with no exposure to Evoque before. Now in the post-market, people are able to learn the therapy and get the same great efficacy that we saw in the trial, but we also saw an improvement in safety factors. We saw improved safety with lower pacemaker rates and lower bleeding rates than we saw in the pre-market pivotal studies, showing that perhaps over time these procedural improvements, how we work together in the Edwards therapy development, are starting to show out now in the clinical data. So very exciting for patients. Additionally, what we're also seeing is that Evoque continues to be a really predictable procedure now in the real world. It continues to be a procedure that's under 60 minutes with not a large standard deviation or variation in time. Additionally, while we see the elimination of TR in patients, very consistent elimination, referral physicians love it. Referral physicians love to see a patient go to the heart team, then come back with no TR. That's causing, we're seeing referral physicians to want to send more patients to the heart team to get Evoque. And finally, all of this is supported by the Edwards high-value field model, meaning that Edwards personnel are helping work on the pre-case planning of a case. We're helping work intra-procedurally to ensure the best possible outcomes, as well as post-procedurally. So our relationship, our partnership is ensuring the best possible clinical outcomes. And all this is leading to growing physician confidence in Evoque and that momentum that we're kind of seeing quarter on quarter. Like we do with all technologies at Edwards, we continue to want to advance Evoque's innovation, as well as make sure that we globalize this product to as many countries as possible. First, on the innovation side of things, in 2026, we'll offer and enable a second device access point. So using the same device in a different access point through vessels of the neck to enable about 5 to 10% of patients who have challenging groin access to have an on-label indication to treat with intrajugular access. Additionally, as we go to the end of 2027 in the second half, we expect to launch a new delivery system and a new valve for Evoque, our next generation valve, built off the Resilia tissue platform. Both of these products we believe will continue to have amazing efficacy, but also improve the safety to the next level, as well as continue to streamline and optimize the procedure to allow it to be even more scalable than it already is. Also, as you can imagine, like we do with Edwards, we launched these products initially in the largest markets of the world, of Europe and the US, but we have to bring these products to around the world. There are over 100 countries in the world that have access to Edwards products. And with Evoque, we're continuously bringing this technology to patients globally. So outside of Evoque in the tricuspid space, we also have Pascal tricuspid, which we believe really complements Evoque. Having repair and replacement is the way to treat the most patients. And with this TR indication of Pascal, we really are seeing differentiated performance where this product is available in Europe. We're seeing that physicians really love for those TR-eligible patients that Pascal makes a lot of sense with its unique features. As many of you know, we've been running a large randomized study called the CLASP II TR study. This is for Pascal against medical treatment, and we're just finishing up the 1-year follow-up of that trial, and so we expect now by the end in Q4 of 2026 to gain U.S. approval, and we'll also present the data probably in Q4 or TCT or so next year. So we're very excited to help use this data set to bring this technology that's been available in Europe and doing well in Europe to the U.S. and the largest market of the U.S. Moving now from tricuspid to mitral, right? We're in an interesting inflection point in mitral where now we're starting to launch mitral replacement, where we've had TEER for many years with great clinical results, but now replacement is extending a treatment to new patients who are undertreated, unaddressed patient groups from before. And for us, this product that we're launching is a SAPIEN M3 product, which really broadens that patient access that I'll talk about in just a minute. But I'll actually first start with Pascal mitral. I mean, for us, Pascal mitral is a fantastic device that has distinct technology that really optimizes procedures and is the workhorse of our mitral portfolio. We believe that this device continues to have really differentiating design and continues to come up with new evidence to support it. Right? It's nitinol-based clips for really atraumatic, allowing for the best possible kind of post-procedure, post-implant kind of results. Secondarily, it's got this cool feature of elongation so that when you're deploying it, especially in the subvalvular apparatus, you're not getting caught in the cords. It can just make that procedure easier. And finally, its delivery system. Very intuitive, very controllable, so you can get the device exactly where you want for predictable MR reduction. Beyond the device features, the data pool continues to grow. Not only do we continue to follow up our first randomized study, the CLASP IID study, which has now over 3 years of follow-up, we now have in the MyCLASP study, a European post-approval real-world study, has 1,000 patients enrolled and hundreds of patients with 2-year follow-up that we present at different conferences. And then we also have the STS registry with over 2,000 patients that have been presenting. So we continue to build the body of evidence to show how fantastic Pascal is in the mitral space. And on the right side, very excitingly, I'm pleased to announce that we have completed enrollment in CLASP IIF. This is our randomized study for Pascal in functional MR patients. It's exciting that we've now finished enrollment. That helps us move forward toward trying to get an indication for this product, both in the few markets that don't have an indication, like the US and Japan. And like all of our technologies, you can imagine that we're kind of relentlessly innovate Pascal. We are already on our 4th iteration of Pascal now. And we plan by the end of 2026 to launch our next generation. This is a product that we really think can streamline the procedures and advance outcomes with changes to both the implant as well as the delivery system. We think this will be fantastic for patients, and we'll have more details of this as we get closer to launching in Q4 of 2026. Now in the mitral space, moving from a repair to replacement. As we talked about, SAPIEN M3 is the first truly transcatheter mitral replacement therapy. This is a space that people have been talking about, man, for 15, 20 years, as long as TAVR. It's been hard to do. And now we finally have a solution that's in the European marketplace and coming to the US. And what's unique about this solution is that we created this very novel docking technology, a technology that creates this kind of landing zone in the subvalvular apparatus and then brings in an amazing valve. A valve we know very well, the SAPIEN valve, that's been used in thousands of times in the mitral position, in calcified mitral, et cetera. And we bring that into the dock to get a great kind of outcome. And you saw at TCT this year, we released our first, the big pivotal study results, the ENCIRCLE study. So let's hear about those clinical results from some physicians.
TMVR with the SAPIEN M3 device is a groundbreaking procedure that opens up treatment options to a broad range of patients.
This gives us another tool in the toolbox to treat patients who are not necessarily suitable for M-TEER and get a surgical-like excellent result. The ENCIRCLE trial was the first pivotal trial of a truly minimally invasive mitral valve replacement technology. We were able to achieve a near obliteration of MR, 0% intraprocedural mortality, 0 valve embolizations, 0 left ventricular outflow tract obstructions.
It's been quite a unique experience with M3 entering the clinical reality. The referrers hear about it, they're contacting us because there's such a tremendous unmet need.
And after the SAPIEN M3 procedure, patients feel better almost immediately.
Patients who have this tremendous unmet need go back to enjoying their life.
When I woke up from the procedure, I was able to breathe strong and vigorously, which I hadn't been able to do for quite some time. I was ready to carry on with life.
How amazing to hear those results on that patient and how their life's changed. The ENCIRCLE trial, our large pivotal study, was obviously released at TCT and showed that we can significantly reduce MR. We can eliminate mitral regurgitation while getting massive health status improvements in patients. At the same time, we were able to do so in a very safe manner, 0.6% mortality at 30 days. And this is in a group of patients that would, by surgery, the surgical predicted risk score would have been over 6.5%, so a tenth of the predicted mortality. Fantastic. And now with these study results, right, we've already been working on trying to get U.S. approval, and we expect U.S. approval in early 2026. So fantastic to take these results and build upon the early launch that we've had in Europe so far. We've been in Europe since about the summertime, and we're seeing great results, a lot of physician excitement for this technology, and we're taking those learnings to bring it to the U.S. now in 2026. And like every technology in the Edwards way, we're not stopping with the first generation. You saw on Bernard's slide early on, we're already planning to bring our amazing RESILIA tissue to this in 2027, and already working on our next generation for the future, where we continue to take and look at the clinical data on how we can make improvements to the device. So all this overall leads to a sales outlook in 2026 of $740 to $780 million. Some of this could be moderated by the pace in which we're creating these new care pathways, right? We're creating new care pathways for unaddressed patient groups in mitral and tricuspid replacement. But it also could be buoyed by all this new evidence. You saw several trials and great data coming out that's continuing to work through the referral community and can really help us on the positive side. And with that, as you saw, there are a lot of these therapy milestones that are coming, whether we're following up now the CLASP IIF study to help us eventually lead to U.S. and Japanese approval, the SAPIEN M3 U.S. launch, TRISCEND II, our pivotal trial. We expect now the 2-year outcomes to be released in Q2 of 2026 in a major conference like ACC or so. Exciting. CLASP II TR and the PASCAL U.S. tricuspid launch, as well as launching our next generation device. There is a lot going on next year that we are excited for in patient care. But finally, in conclusion, right, I think you've seen that our goal with TMTT is to create this portfolio of technology of repair and replacement for each of the mitral and tricuspid to really allow for personalized care to really help patients the most. And if you look, for instance, in the U.S., the largest market, we started off with PASCAL MR in the lower left. and then we brought Evoke. And so if you look at our current revenue base, those are the two technologies driving most of our revenue, and accordingly in 2026. But in 2026, we launched the next two waves in the U.S. Sapien M3 launches in early 2026. Pascal tricuspid launches in late 2026. So we go from our first two waves to our next two waves of growth. Fantastic for patient care. And we believe that all this together really provides a clear path to $2 billion of sales in 2030. And each year, if you look at our growth, our incremental dollar revenue growth, it's an increasing contribution to Edwards' growth. For those of you at TCT, there was an interesting study called the Preview Study, which talked a little bit about the prevalence of different diseases. And if you looked at mitral and tricuspid disease, look at the number of people who have this disease, man, it's greater than aortic stenosis. So while we feel like we have a great path to $2 billion in 2030, we actually feel like there's a great path beyond 2030, as you can imagine. Our technologies continue to treat more patients throughout the world in a fantastic way, and we're just looking forward to the future. Thank you so much. I'm very excited to call up YJ to talk about the innovations in the surgical business now. Thanks.
It's a good time to be a cardiac surgeon. Volumes are up, patients are coming out of the woodwork, and the growth rate is off the charts.
The complexity of the patients are increasing. It's not just singular valve disease, it's usually multi-valve disease.
And the number of patients coming to us for tricuspid regurgitation has exploded.
One of the innovations we're really excited about is the Resilia technology.
And whether it's the Inspirus valve, the Connect conduit, or the Mitris valve, we're seeing durability data that's exceeding previous expectations.
We have the Commence 10-year study that is coming up, Momentous 1-year study coming up next year.
If the Resilia tissue can truly last longer than the prior valves, that will drastically change strategic lifetime management.
So I'm really excited about the future of cardiac surgery and what Edwards is bringing in the pipeline, because it's giving hope to improve our patients' lives.
Good morning. I'm YJO. I'm excited to give you an update and an outlook for 2026 on our surgical business. Now, we are continuing to see patients' lives around the world being transformed with our leading surgical innovations. More patients around the world are getting structural heart procedures, and our differentiated Resilia innovations are meeting patient needs around the world. And we're building on our leadership with new clinical evidence and broadening the portfolio. Now, let me tell you about some of our patients that are benefiting from our surgical technologies. Let me tell you the story of Connie. She was diagnosed with rheumatic heart disease at age 18. And in discussions with her physicians and with shared decision-making, Connie chose to have an Edwards surgical valve because she did not want to have a lifetime of blood thinners. In addition, she also wanted to have children. So she underwent her first open heart surgery in 2016 and currently has 3 Edwards surgical valves implanted in the aortic, mitral, and tricuspid position. So today, Connie is a mother of 2, leading an incredibly active life, and that's in part into her surgical valves from Edwards. So surgery is growing across all types of patients. We are seeing more complex patients being treated surgically with multivalvular procedures. We are also seeing that there are more complex aortic patients coming forward, which includes ventral procedures, patients with aortic regurgitation, and also those with bicuspid valve disease. Now, we also see growth taking place in mitral and tricuspid disease due to the halo effect of our transcatheter options that are now available to treat this disease state. It's bringing patients off the sidelines. So I want to show you this video, which features our real-life surgical patients. They are younger, living longer, and expecting more from life. You'll see that they're living active and fulfilling lives after surgery, and they want to stay active without having to be on blood thinners for life. And they want valves that will last and help them in the lifetime management of their disease. They're looking for the best solutions to improve their quality of life. I'm always inspired when I see how our patients' lives are being impacted with the use of our technologies. So let's talk a little bit about what we're doing in surgical to deliver on the promise for patients and physicians. So RESILIA tissue is the benchmark for valve durability. It's now on all of our flagship products in our surgical business, and you see it also on SAPIEN 3 Ultra RESILIA in our transcatheter portfolio, as Dan mentioned earlier. To date, we have over 650,000 patients treated with our RESILIA innovations, and we have a breadth of data on RESILIA, approximately 20 studies involving 7,000 patients. And we're not stopping. We're going to continue to expand and innovate with our technologies using RESILIA tissue, as you can see on the screen, and you heard Daveen just mention previously. And we're going to continue to drive data generation, long-term data generation that talks about the impact of RESILIA tissue on our patients. So our RESILIA portfolio is truly transforming patient lives around the world. Together, INSPIRIS, CONNECT, and MITRIS illustrate how RESILIA is doing just that. INSPIRIS is the leading surgical aortic valve globally around the world. And as mentioned, it has provided extended durability with RESILIA tissue. It is also the only surgical aortic valve with VFit technology that expands for future TAV and TAV procedures, which allows for best patient lifetime management. We also know that there is significant opportunities to treat patients with INSPIRIS around the world. Let me tell you about our patient Matsuyo, who you saw on the patient video. He's 74 years old, and after receiving an INSPIRIS aortic valve to treat his aortic stenosis, he continues to be a marathon runner, and he shares his journey of resilience and gratitude after receiving this aortic valve. So it's pretty impressive what our patients do when they're given a second chance at life. So let's talk about another innovation in our aortic portfolio. CONNECT is the first and only ready-to-implant aortic valve conduit. We have seen significant growth in the U.S. in dental procedures since the launch of CONNECT back in 2020. We also saw excellent clinical results presented at STS in January of this year, and we launched CONNECT recently in Europe with very positive surgeon response for this technology that they've waited 5 years for based on the feedback that they've heard from their U.S. colleagues. Now, CONNECT, as I mentioned, is an ideal solution for patients that need dental surgery. And there's nothing more powerful than when you have a cardiac surgeon that chooses a technology that they believe in, not just for their patients, but for themselves when they become the patient. And that's exactly what Dr. Robertson did. So let's hear directly from him about his experience with CONNECT.
Some of these more difficult patients that we operate on today could not be operated on in the early days of cardiac surgery. Just didn't have the ability, didn't have the devices.
Probably the most complex operation we do is a biobental. So what's been your experience?
Well, I think you know my experience. You're my surgeon. I had a Bental operation by you, and both of us felt that the CONNECT conduit and its new technology, it was clearly going to be in my advantage because it really makes the operation simpler.
Saving time, not having to construct a conduit and a valve together. With the most modern RESILIA treatment of the aortic valve tissue, we are really making a quantum advance in what we are able to offer patients.
The CONNECT conduit is a game changer. It really makes long-term survival better.
Luckily, working with a company like Edwards Lifesciences, even though they have such a highly effective product, they never quit making that investment for our patients like yourself.
So Dr. Robertson is based in Santa Monica, so he's obviously enjoying the locale and continuing to be active and walking on the beach. But his story really highlights the trust that clinicians place in CONNECT, not just for their patients, but obviously for themselves. So let's talk about another innovation in our portfolio, MITRIS. So MITRIS has been specifically designed for the mitral position, and it brings the durability of RESILIA tissue to these patients. It has also been designed to make implantation even easier for surgeons and better for patients. It is the leading mitral replacement valve in the U.S., and we launched MITRIS in China earlier this year and continuing the rollout of MITRIS in Europe, where it was launched last year. And patient enrollment is complete in the global Momentum study. So another patient from our patient video, Sawapa. She's a 51-year-old accountant from Thailand who had heart disease as a result of rheumatic fever. She chose a MITRIS RESILIA valve with her doctor due to her active lifestyle, and again, to have freedom from blood thinners. These patient stories highlight the impact that our technologies have on the lives of patients around the world. So now let me share with you the data that supports our innovations and the experiences that these patients feel on a day-to-day basis. So one of our biggest data releases in surgical this year was a presentation of the 8-year clinical outcomes of those RESILIA tissue valves versus non-RESILIA tissue valves. And the numbers are impressive. There were approximately, in this study, 1,000 patients at 8 years, where 99.3% of patients with RESILIA valves were free from structural valve deterioration and reoperation and showed excellent sustained clinical hemodynamics when compared to non-RESILIA valves. This means that patients can count on long-term performance and durability with RESILIA tissue valves. And we're not stopping there. In 2026, we will see bringing more clinical evidence to support our innovations. We'll see the landmark 10-year results from the RESILIA aortic pivotal trial study, and we will also have outcomes from the 1-year MITRIS study, which is the largest core lab adjudicated MITRIS study. And this is all a part of our commitment to back up our innovations with robust real-world evidence. Now, looking beyond aortic and mitral disease, as Daveen has mentioned, there's a huge unmet need in tricuspid regurgitation. In the U.S. alone, we estimate approximately 1.6 million people suffer from moderate to severe tricuspid regurgitation. As we mentioned, these transcatheter options to address this disease has now brought more patients off the sidelines seeking treatment that previously had no other options. So these patients deserve a full complement of solutions, and we in surgical are working hard to be able to do that. And that's where TriFormis comes in. It will be the first surgical valve specifically designed and indicated for the tricuspid position. It's designed specifically for the unique anatomy of the tricuspid valve, making it easier to implant and improving outcomes for patients. And with more awareness and treatment options, we do finally feel that now we can collectively address this patient need, not just with transcatheter options, but also for those that need a surgical intervention. And we are excited to say that we're planning to have TriFormis roll out in the back half of 2026 in the U.S. So with Inspiris, Connect, MITRIS, and soon TriFormis, you will see that Edwards offers the broadest portfolio of surgical structural heart therapies. And with this breadth, it means that we can provide the best solutions for more patients than ever before. Now, our innovation pipeline in surgical is robust. We have multiple launches planned for the coming years, from Inspiris, Connect, MITRIS, as I mentioned, TriFormis next year, and next generation valves. We are always looking for new ways to help our patients. We also are exploring new spaces like left atrial appendage exclusion to keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible to help meet patient needs in the areas and the procedures that we are in. So, looking ahead, surgical in 2026 is projecting mid-single-digit growth in 2026. We expect increased RESILIA adoption and new product launches to help drive this growth. And the number of aortic and mitral patients is growing. And with new transcatheter innovations that are bringing more patients to seek treatment, these patients, some of them are resulting in having a surgical intervention because they're not capable to be, not able to be treated through transcatheter options. We feel very confident in our outlook and our ability to deliver innovative surgical technologies in structural heart for patients and for physicians. So thank you so much for your time. And I want to bring back up to the front our CEO, Bernard.
Excellent, YJ.
Thanks also to Devin and Dan. Great presentation for TAVR and TMTT. So what I want to do now is a brief recap about what you just heard about our core innovation, TAVR, TMTT, and surgical. So in TAVR, SAPIEN has set a global benchmark right now, and this is enabling us to enter a new era of proactive disease management. Dan talked about that. We have so many catalysts there. In TMTT, this comprehensive portfolio, we had 2 waves of growth in the past. Davin talked about that. We have 2 new ones in the US, starting in 2026. This is also enabling us to start, this personalized, therapy for patients and expanding patient access. In surgical, new therapies and leading innovation to transform patient lives, globally. Across all, what you can expect, from us is we will continue to partner with physicians, the way we do it in a very high quality manner, with medical societies, regulators, payers, patients, to clearly, innovate, big innovation, advanced science, and ensure that, patients have access to Edwards therapy, best therapy in the world. So we have had 65 years of success, and I trust you see the same. We still have a lot to come here. I don't believe I have seen a cycle like the cycle we are here with so many catalysts, new technologies, new therapies, new indication, addressing patient group that have no other solutions today, where we are going to create new markets. So it is pretty exciting to see this very unique innovation strategy in action. We love all of this. We are very committed. We will stay behind it. At the same time, we see many emerging opportunities to be able to reach more patients and to complement our portfolio. So you are going to hear more, and we are going to start with Dan and the TAVR AR opportunity. Dan?
Thanks, Bernard. Thank you so much. Well, it's early, and the disease is not well understood, and there is a ton to learn, and it's going to require a significant commitment, and this is aortic regurgitation, but it is a very large clinical unmet need, and it sounds like the perfect challenge and opportunity for Edwards Lifesciences. I want to start with some basic education between aortic stenosis and aortic regurgitation. I think it's important. So aortic stenosis is a narrowing of the valve. It's a restriction of the opening of the aortic valve. This is because the leaflets are calcified. They're heavily calcified, and their movement is restricted, right? So you have less oxygenated blood going to the organs of the body, and the left ventricle has to work really hard to get the blood out to those organs because the narrowing is so restricted in the opening that the leaflets really struggle to open. That calcium on the aortic valve is the perfect thing for a transcatheter valve to anchor on, right? That's what makes it so compelling and so successful. It's very, very different with aortic regurgitation. We have incomplete closing of the aortic valve. The leaflets are typically healthy, and you get a dilated valve. The annulus moves away from itself, and so the leaflets can't close properly. So you get this hole, and now you've got backflow. So now that oxygenated blood is not getting to vital organs because it keeps coming back on itself. You get this leak, and the heart has to work harder and harder to get the blood to those vital organs. And so you get the problem, a similar problem, just in a different way, but you don't have that calcium anymore to anchor on, and so transcatheter technologies need to be very different to find a solution for these patients. What's for sure, it is a deadly disease, and it goes largely untreated. It's not as easy to diagnose by echocardiography, and so it is typically underdetected, it's definitively underreferred, and it's definitively undertreated. And just like aortic stenosis, if untreated, very, very high mortality. Unlike aortic stenosis, not that many options for surgery than surgery. And so we believe that despite early and despite not well understood, and despite a lot of work ahead, this is the perfect place for Edwards Lifesciences' talented team and deep expertise to go after this important disease state, meaningful clinical unmet need, and we think that this will provide an important growth opportunity for us in the mid to long term. We like our strategy a lot. Our intention is to run hard at this with complementary technologies. We believe complementary technologies will enable the broadest amount of patients to be treated. Right? It's, again, early days. With J-Valve, which is now under the Edwards name, Sojourn, this is in clinical trial. This is our pivotal trial. Our Journey pivotal trial is enrolling. Everybody knows that we entered into an agreement to acquire JenaValve. That is under FTC review, but we remain confident that we're going to get a positive ruling there. And assuming that ruling is positive, then we would expect that to close in Q1 of 2026. So it's early, and just like we did with TAVR AS, we're going to have to apply the same playbook. Committed leadership, evidence generation, continuous innovation to try and advance this therapy for patients. The opportunity here is going to be in the work. But we believe with a large clinical unmet need and our expertise, we're confident we can make a meaningful impact on these patients, and we're confident that this will provide a meaningful growth opportunity for us in the mid to longer term. So thanks for listening, and I'll hand over to Todd Brinton, who's going to tell us more about heart failure and interventional heart failure. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. All right, good morning, everyone. I'm here to talk to you about structural heart failure. All right. So this is a huge growing epidemic due to the aging population and current health trends, and the impact is substantial. So as a reminder, when we talk about structural heart failure, we're referring to the large number of patients that have symptoms of heart failure due to either valvular or non-valvular structural heart disease. It's the large number of heart failure patients out there. I'm here as the Chief Scientific Officer, but also as a practicing interventional cardiologist for almost 20 years. And I've had the responsibility for the care of patients with heart failure. So, keeping in mind, as patients go untreated, they enter a devastating downward spiral, as highlighted really by this graph here, with their quality of life deteriorating rapidly and ultimately leading to hospitalizations as highlighted by these red dots. Now, as the disease progresses, heart failure hospitalizations become more frequent, which not only impacts the patient, but it impacts the entire healthcare system. But let's talk about the why. It turns out that the key driver of this decline is increased intracardiac pressure. As patients progress through the disease, intracardiac pressure rises, and this mirrors the decline in quality of life. These two things run in parallel. Luckily, we now have evolving solutions to address this challenging problem. One of these is mechanical pressure reduction with technologies like our investigational Apture left atrial to coronary sinus shunt. There's also implantable sensor therapies that help patients better manage their disease. So let's go a little deeper on pressure sensor management. The cardiac pressure management is changing the way that the patients interact with their disease. What you're seeing here in this diagram is the lowering of pressure through the use of medications with feedback from a pressure sensor management strategy. You can see as pressures get lower, patients improve. In fact, there is clear evidence of improved outcomes for these patients. In fact, a recent meta-analysis published in the Journal of the American College of Cardiology just demonstrated a very, very large reduction, a 36% reduction in heart failure hospitalizations at 1 year. and for the first time, a 25% reduction in mortality in patients with heart failure with reduced ejection fraction at 2 years. Pretty impressive. But what if we could do even better? So the growth of our implantable heart failure management business will offer a comprehensive toolbox of pressure sensor management solutions. I want to draw your attention to the diagram on the left, the heart, the cardiac structures, and the great vessels. What you see by the blue dot is the pulmonary artery. Interestingly enough, this is exciting that we can monitor pulmonary pressures and improve the management of patients. But what if we expanded to the red dot? Direct measurement of intracardiac left atrial pressure may yield even better results. In fact, every cardiologist was trained on intracardiac pressures, including myself. Any question we had, he took the patient to the cath lab and did a right heart cath. So these direct patch pressures are how we manage our patients. It's how we make better decisions about our care. So as Bernard stated earlier, we've built a strong foundation in structural heart disease, pioneering innovations in valvular heart disease. We have deep and extensive knowledge of delivering therapies into the structural heart. We know how to deliver. We know how to develop implants. So, in addition to the management of left heart failure we just discussed, there are lots of emerging opportunities. There's large number of patients with unaddressed patient disease. We're driven to continue solving large, complex, unmet needs with our pioneering transcatheter innovations and our trusted partnerships with clinicians. We're confident in our abilities to tackle these expanded opportunities to improve patients' lives. But let me reiterate the burden and the opportunity. Intervening early with the right solution is critical. By meeting patients where they are, we're shifting the trajectory, altering the course of structural heart disease for patients. We have an opportunity here. We can give patients a new outlook on life. We can keep them out of the hospital, and we can give them the quality of life that they want and they ultimately deserve. That's what the strategy is here. So with that, I'm going to pass this on to my colleague, Diane Gomez-Dennis, who'll go through IHFM.
Heart failure care in the United States is in dire need for change. There's a huge demand for specialists, and there's just not enough of us. Unless patients get optimized the right way early on, they're looking at not so great outcomes, and that's where the Cordella system comes into action for me.
Having all of that information in one place really allows care teams to manage patients most efficiently, and the patients understand the connection between their role in the disease management and the physiology.
Being able to see my vital statistics, especially the pulmonary pressures, every day gives me control over my health and a sense of empowerment.
Cordella has changed the amount of times I go to the doctor. It's enabled me to just enjoy life.
The impact of Cordella system on patients has been amazing. It bridges the gap between clinicians and patients.
It's an opportunity to use insights from data to better manage the patients. I think that's truly the future of heart failure care.
Well, hello, everyone, and I'm pleased to be here to share our progress with the newest addition to the Edwards portfolio, implantable heart failure management. At Edwards, we are out to shape the future of heart failure management. We seek to address the unmet needs of a significant number of patients at risk for hospitalization and transform the standard of care by empowering not just clinicians, but also patients with data. Our strategy, which includes investment in technology and evidence, will enable this data-driven management approach to scale beyond a historically narrow group of early adopters. Heart failure is a major and growing burden that requires a novel and a scalable solution. Over 1 million patients in the U.S. are hospitalized due to heart failure each year, and that volume continues to grow. Patients face worsening quality of life, including physical limitations, emotional distress, and social isolation. And the risk for rehospitalizations and mortality is high in this population. And as Todd mentioned, the cost of care is quite significant. Further, the strain on the heart failure cardiology community will expand as only about 1,500 advanced heart failure specialists are in the U.S. working to change the trajectory for these patients. The patient and the healthcare provider needs are clear and daunting, but there is progress. Patient access to important pressure sensor guided management solutions has improved. The NCD that was released earlier this year truly removes a major barrier for U.S. heart failure patients. This and the mounting clinical evidence truly support these innovations. Cordella is our pulmonary artery pressure sensor solution, which begins in the cath lab with a short outpatient procedure. The sensor connects the patient to the Cordella platform. Patients are engaged and informed, finding the system easy to use. They prefer the unique seated position for readings, and they pay attention to their daily trends. Data flows to the clinical care team, now feeding a cycle of data-driven, proactive heart failure management. And this patient experience leads to a high level of long-term engagement and therefore compliance. Patients will also often change behaviors based on their data. In our early clinical experience, 1 in 2 patients made lifestyle changes. And lastly, our growing volume of data will continue to provide us valuable insights to fuel further development for solutions for both patients and clinicians. Cordella is a strong first differentiated offering from IHFM. Empowerment of patients and providers requires a user-friendly platform that facilitates scalable and engaging workflows for both the clinic and the home. And the system's comprehensive and actionable data provides confidence and peace of mind while medical therapy decisions are being made. And this management approach should replace today's more reactive, symptom-driven standard of care that U.S. patients see today. The patient-centric experience is the differentiator. A patient's ability to see their own pressure and vitals data, paired with the ease of seated reading, leads to strong and sustained engagement and compliance, putting some control back into a patient's hands. And the patient behavior modifications that we see today are a positive step toward a future where a patient can self-manage and adjust medications without waiting for a physician to take action each time. Our path to transforming heart failure management is to establish a new, data-driven, and patient-engaged standard of care. We are executing on a roadmap of innovation that includes novel implantable pulmonary artery and left atrial pressure sensors for both indirect and direct measures of pressure, and a platform that aids in decision-making and streams workflows. We are committed to building the evidence to inspire adoption and demonstrate the value of data-driven management, an approach which now engages the patient in their own care and moves the field from reactive and descriptive assessments to predictive and proactive care. 2025 has been a foundation-building year for IHFM, and we continue to make progress expanding new capabilities in our transition as a commercial business. We are executing on a technology roadmap, simplifying the Cordella procedure, and enhancing our software platform. And we've added to our portfolio with a new left atrial pressure solution, VLAP. We are growing the evidence for the Cordella platform with new long-term data demonstrating sustained benefit and impressive levels of patient engagement. We are actively enrolling in 2 studies, our proactive HF2 study for Cordella and the Vector HF2 studies with VLAP. We are pleased by the favorable feedback we receive from physicians and their patients who are choosing Cordella. We are collecting learnings from our current Cordella early user evaluation phase, which informs our next stage of commercialization. Looking forward to 2026, we will continue to develop and deploy new features to enhance the Cordella platform. We're expanding our data sciences capabilities and building both near-term and longer-term data for both Cordella and VLAP. We will continue to partner with our customers to unlock scalability and maximize the impact on patient care. Transforming this category will take time as awareness grows and our solution evolves and takes hold. We are excited for the future, and we're committed to building this new patient-engaged standard of care in heart failure management. Thank you all, and with that, we will move into a 15-minute break. Thank you.
All right. Good morning, everyone. For those online, thanks for rejoining us from our break. So I'm Scott Ullum, and you've heard a lot this morning about our plans for Edwards Lifesciences. I'm going to bring that together through a financial lens and talk about how our objectives and our plans reflect and resource Edwards' corporate strategy. So financial outcomes are a result, of course, the plans that we have in place and the investments we're making to generate the results that you'll see in the financial profile now. So it's really three elements. The first is, of course, strong organic top-line growth, and we've got this portfolio of structural heart therapies that support the top line. The second is healthy and expanding margins. So starting with gross margins, which are high-impact, high-value products made efficiently, combined with operating expenses and an operating margin that will expand 50 to 100 basis points constant currency in the years ahead. And the combination of those two yield a leveraged earnings per share profile for the next, as we look forward. The third piece, of course, is smart capital allocation. Our capital allocation priorities have not changed, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. So starting with sales, again, this is a portfolio now of therapies that contribute to Edwards' growth rate on the top line. It's not just one business, it's multiple different therapies that contribute to our sales growth. That sales growth is fueled by research and development. It's fueled by a lot of different elements, but none more important or noticeable than R&D. So the reason why we expect to grow 8 to 10% in 2026 is partly due to investments in research and development that we made 3 years and 5 years and 10+ years ago. The third piece is sustained leadership position supported by evidence-based impact and value to patients and clinicians and healthcare systems and payers. So to give you a closer look, this year we expect to be at sales in the range of $6 billion. So we've seen significant growth over the last several years. And the composition of that is 60-40. So 60% US, 40% OUS. It's this global footprint that positions Edwards to bring therapies to patients around the world. And we now have resources in place in all major regions to support the company's growth. So you heard a lot about the sales plans and our growth opportunities across our existing innovation, core innovations, as well as our emerging opportunities for patients who are addressed today, but then among the 20 million structural heart patients, those of whom are unaddressed today, and where we've got an opportunity to bring therapies to benefit those patients in the years ahead. So the second element is our margin profile. So we've got strong gross profit margins, as you know, again, by bringing high-impact, high-value therapies to market after manufacturing and distributing them efficiently. And it's a big part of our operations model, and I think it reflects our world-class global supply chain and quality organization. We're also, at the same time, expanding our field organization. So having Edwards personnel in the field close to providers and operators is really an important part of our strategy, and we invest to make that happen. We're going to continue to invest to bolster that field force. And the third piece, of course, is continuing to invest on a prioritized basis in research and development and other areas that can really help fuel our growth, but fuel it in a way that also gives us an opportunity to improve our operating margins over time. So here's a walk across of the current 2025 expected operating margin of 27 to 28% to next year's estimated operating margin of about 100 basis points higher. It starts, of course, with strong organic revenue growth, and those increased sales generate increased profit. The gross margin level will see volume efficiency. So scaling our business, being able to manufacture therapies and technologies at higher volumes gives us an opportunity to manufacture at lower rates. We're going to continue to see leverage from our manufacturing footprint. We've got facilities across all three of our key production regions, Europe, the Americas, and Asia Pacific, and we'll see leverage from those manufacturing facilities and that network that we have in place to produce implants and delivery systems. And for those of you who were here last night, you got to look at some of those delivery systems and how we design those for ultimate commercialization. New product introductions end up being a drag on gross margins in the short term. So when we're making technologies and introducing new products, generally at lower volumes, that's a drag on gross profit margins, but it's swamped by the benefits we get from mix and improving volumes in existing therapies. And of course, annualization of tariffs will also be a little bit of a headwind in 2026. We had some tariff expense in 2025, but not for the full year. We are planning that we'll experience that for the full year in 2026. In terms of operations, similar to the efficiencies that we get on the production side, we also get efficiencies in general and administrative spending as the business continues to grow and as we support this global footprint with general and administrative activities. We're going to continue to prioritize research and development initiatives. So we're continuing to grow research and development spending, but with pretty disciplined prioritization of what platforms we're investing in, what platforms we're accelerating, and what platforms we may be deprioritizing or deaccelerating based upon progress that we make across those different R&D platforms. Foreign exchange ends up being a little bit of a benefit to operating margins this year. About 30 basis points of operating margin increase will be from foreign exchange flowing through the P&L. And we're going to continue to invest in that field force I mentioned before to really drive patient access initiatives and support patient activation initiatives, as well as continuing to grow the business with the right infrastructure, the right personnel, the right resources in the field. And then finally, new investments. So making investments in emerging opportunities like the acquisition of JenaValve is going to be a short-term headwind to operating margins. But you roll all that up together, and we're expecting about a 100 basis point expansion in operating margins in 2026. So research and development. I mentioned before prioritizing R&D is an important part of our strategy. And right now, about 3/4 of our research and development spend, estimated to be $1.1 billion in 2026, comes from the generation of scientific evidence. So spend relating to clinical trials, clinical affairs, regulatory affairs, medical affairs are all part of that research and development budget. The other 1/4 is sustaining research and development. So R&D to support our existing therapies, and that's an important part of what we do on an engineering side in research and development. You can see on the right hand what I mentioned before, which is research and development spending continuing to increase, but at a lower rate than the top line will increase. So the result of that is we have margins that went from 19.4% last year, estimated 18% this year, declining to 17% or so in 2026. So we're pleased with that trajectory. It's part of this 50 to 100 basis point operating margin expansion that we've guided to. So here's how that translates in terms of earnings per share. This year, $2.56 to $2.62 is our guidance for the full year 2025. The biggest increase, of course, in earnings per share next year is core business operations, offset by some of the additional investments that we're making in emerging opportunities, but the net of that gets us to 29 to 35 cents in EPS. Tax is a little bit of a headwind. We're increasing our tax rate guidance for 2026 by about 100 basis points on the bottom end and the top end to 16 to 19%, and the impact of that is around 3 cents at the midpoint of the range. The combination of interest income, share count, and foreign exchange ends up being about flat by the time we get down to earnings per share, which is unusual. In the years past, we've had a lot of impact from FX starting at the top line and flowing down through the P&L. We don't see that based upon current rates. Of course, they're changing every day, but based upon current rates, we're seeing pretty nominal impacts through the P&L from FX. So that gets us to $2.80 to $2.95 for 2026, and then growing in 2027 and beyond, leverage to the top line. So assume on average constant currency around 10% top line growth. Expect that we'll have bottom line growth, EPS growth in excess of that level. Okay, finally, strategic capital deployment. So there are a couple different elements to it. Of course, the first piece is investing to support our growth, and specifically including PP&E. So our production capacity in these production facilities around the world, including our new facility that we're building right now in Valencia, Spain, consumes a lot of that capital that we are generating through cash flow. The second piece is external investments. So Edwards is an active acquirer and an active investor to supplement our internal work that we're doing to develop new therapies. And those investments come in the form of minority investments, seed capital. We invest in intellectual property. We buy options to acquire companies based upon certain milestones that they may meet in the future. And so that's an important direction for some of this cash flow that the company generates. The third piece is returning capital to shareholders. We have a consistent track record of buying back stock. I'll show that in just a second. So here's a closer look at capital spending. We're expecting around $280 million in CapEx in 2026, a little bit of an increase over our expected 2025 levels. CapEx, is a little bit lumpy. It doesn't fall into 90-day periods perfectly, but overall, we're spending about $250 million a year on capital. Where are we investing? Half of that comes in our production facilities and a global supply chain, and the balance is in infrastructure like you've seen around here and the research and development investments that we make to help support the company's growth. So share repurchase, I mentioned, is an important feature of how we manage our balance sheet and how we allocate our capital. And you can see over time we've done a pretty aggressive job of buying in our share count. We first prioritize offsetting the impacts of incentive compensation and performance-based stock awards. We want to offset that dilution, but we're also looking for opportunities regularly to bring down the net share count over time. And you can see we've done that. You should expect that we will continue to buy back stock. We have about $2 billion of authorization remaining, and we're always looking for opportunities to do that at the right time. So bringing this all together, here's a comprehensive look at our financial guidance for 2026. You can note on the upper right-hand corner what I mentioned before, which is the FX impact to sales is nominal this year. The $6.4 to $6.8 billion of guidance incorporates only a little bit of foreign exchange impact, hardly worth mentioning. And we're expecting gross margins similar to 2025 in the 78 to 79% range, with operating margins 28 to 29%. About 30 basis points of that is the benefit of FX. So think net 70 basis point range of operating margin expansion in 2026. So overall, our financial strategy, these objectives and plans that I've taken you through, are designed to create enhanced shareholder value. So this combination of double-digit top-line growth, around 10% on average, constant currency going forward, plus operating margin expansion, yielding leveraged EPS growth, we think is the right financial formula to support the company's growth and to provide a great opportunity for investors. So with that, we'll wrap up the financial presentation. Bernard's going to do a wrap-up for what you've heard this morning, and then we'll take a quick break before Q&A. So Bernard, over to you.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Scott, and to all of the presenters this morning. So let me do a quick recap about what you heard this morning. We are this pretty amazing company, committed to delivering sustainable, differentiated growth with a very clear strategy, bringing big innovation, high-quality science to solve large and complex patient needs. And all of this is resulting in creating and defining new therapeutic areas for us and for patients. And we are uniquely positioned to shape the future of structural heart with this most comprehensive portfolio of differentiated therapies. Many innovations that we talk about this morning are first of their kind and designed to help patients live better and longer. I started my presentation this morning talking about how special we are as a company. And what makes us special is the combination of our success as a company over the years, our very unique strategy, solely focusing on structural heart, taking a risk, having a long-term commitment, and our culture, caring about patients every day. We have 16,000 employees globally across about 100 countries, a little bit more. And every day, they wake up, they go to work, and they care about patients. We are also very committed to strengthening the communities wherever we are present, wherever our employees are living and working. Our board of directors, very diverse background, highly experienced, guiding the company to the best of their ability. They are focused, they are engaged, they are present, always available. I'm very thankful of having this kind of board of directors, around me. To recap our financial outlook, 2026 will be another year of distinguished performance after having had a strong 2025. What I like about where we are, it is going to be led by our core innovation across TAVR, surgical, and TMTT. It is not just one, it is all of them. We have also many catalysts that are going to have a big impact in 26, 27, and 28. As a matter of fact, for 27 and beyond, we have a very strong P&L, very healthy balance sheet to fund our very unique innovation strategy. So in summary, we are very well positioned for sustained and differentiated performance. Our strategy is clear: create long-term value for patients, healthcare systems, and shareholders by focusing on structural heart disease, solely focusing on structural heart disease, solving large and complex patient needs, and pioneering new therapies. So in summary, this is Edwards. Innovation with purpose, powered by science, centered on the patients. Thank you very much for listening this morning. I think as a team we prepared this morning to make it comprehensive and exciting for all of you. We are going to take now a very short break in about 5 minutes to prepare for Q&A.
Who's ready for some Q&A? All right, good. We are too. So in front of you, we've got all the speakers that you heard from earlier today. We've got a lot of great analysts with a lot of great questions. We're going to try to get to as many of you as possible. With that in mind, if you could limit your questions to just one, not 6 or 7, but just one, and we'll try to get to as many as possible. When you have a question, just raise your hand. I'll call on you. Press the red button in front of you, and then your mic will be live. At the end of the Q&A session, Bernard's going to make some brief closing remarks, and then we're going to go to a patient video, and then I'll come back with some logistics in terms of what's next around the lunch. So with that, first question, maybe David.
Thank you, Mark. David Roman from Goldman Sachs. Maybe we could start on the TMTT side. Clearly a lot of drivers here, but as you put the 2026 guidance into context of the $2 billion in 2030, it starts to put a lot of onus on those outer year periods. So can you maybe just walk us through how you get from what it will roughly be $200 million in incremental growth in 26 to something that needs to be multiples of that as you look forward?
No, sure. Let me give you a little background. Thanks so much for the question. So first, at the highest level, as I mentioned probably my last slide, if you look at TMTT next year, most of the growth and most of the revenue is driven really by our first 2 products, PASCAL Mitral and EVOQUE. So I'll first start with strategy. Now you see next year in the U.S., the next two growth drivers, both a SAPIEN M3 in the beginning of the year and then in Q4, PASCAL tricuspid. The first two growth drivers are really a lot of that $740 to $780 million next year. We have two new growth drivers coming in after. If you look now kind of at the numbers, in 2025, from 2024 to 2025, we grew about $185 million year over year. Next year, to our midpoint, it's growing about $220 million. It's increasing. We expect that to continue to increase each year because ultimately those core patients are coming in for PASCAL, mitral, and EVOQUE, and then we have these kind of new growth drivers adding in. You can imagine that in the incremental dollar growth from year over year, that number continues to grow. To help us get to what we feel comfortable about saying is reaching that $2 billion in 2030 overall.
Travis?
Thanks, everybody. I wanted to ask on the PROGRESS trial. First, last year, I think this outlook slides had PROGRESS as the TAVR growth driver, and it wasn't in this year's slides. I don't know if that was a reason to ask on that. How long do you think it'll take, if the data is positive, for this to impact TAVR growth, and do you need guidelines to change, and how much do you have in your targets for moderate?
Do you want to take it, Dan?
Yeah, I'm happy to start, right? PROGRESS, first of all, excited about the opportunity that we have with PROGRESS, right? Right now, that trial is it's finished enrollment. We closed enrollment, but we're still in the follow-up phase. We think that if we follow that normal path, we'll be ready to present at TCT next year. We're blinded, completely blinded to what that data looks like, etc. I think a lot in terms of impact. I mean, clearly it's a independent layer of growth for us, right? It's definitely a catalyst, more for mid-long term. When I think about these indications, particularly asymptomatic and moderate indications in the future, very different indications to what we had with high risk, low risk, intermediate risk. These had a predicate. These were like, the predicate existed for surgery, the referral patterns in place. With these newer indications, that predicate doesn't exist. The process of education, democratization of all this is a completely different muscle that we have to do upstream. That being said, we already see the impact of this type of data, looking at asymptomatic and looking at what it's doing for proactive disease management. We anticipate the impact of moderate will be quite similar. Not a light switch, but a durable impact on our growth over time. That's kind of what we're looking forward to. We're looking forward to the opportunity once we know more about the data.
Dan, moderate was one of the fastest enrolling studies, no?
Well, I guess we know two things about moderate. One is it enrolled very fast, right? It enrolled ahead of expectation, which kind of gives us a good sense of what the market opportunity is, what the unmet need is for these patients. That was encouraging. It enrolled very fast. The other thing that we know is we have a continued access program with the PROGRESS trial. Patients continue to be enrolled in a continued access program as part of that clinical trial. The demand in that is still very, very strong. They're the only two things that we know. As far as what the data is, we learn more about that at TCT.
Shagun? There you go.
Okay. Shagun Singh, RBC Capital. Thank you for taking the question. I just wanted to touch on guidance and get a better sense of what's factored in. How did you arrive at the 8% to 10%? As you think about the momentum you have in 2025, how should we think about that in that context? Is it more of a base case and it's still early in the year? Also on EPS, the JenaValve dilution, you're still having conversations with the FTC. Why was that the right approach to guidance, and what is factored in for 2026?
Yeah, thanks for the question. On sales, this year in 2025, we started at 8% to 10% guidance as well, and we think that's the right way to start for 2026. We're optimistic about 2026. We think it's going to be a strong year, but we're also cognizant of the fact that it's early. We're still in 2025. There are risks that can enter into the equation, and We're going to be monitoring those carefully. We think that 8%-10% is the right starting point for 2026. We always encourage people to model to the midpoint of our guidance ranges. That's at least where we are at this point. I think in terms of earnings per share and JenaValve, we could have taken a couple different approaches. Was it in? Is it out? What we decided to do was make some assumptions about what the impact of owning JenaValve could be, depending upon when we close it, depending upon what we learn once we own it, and what integration plans we would develop. Those are included in that $2.80-$2.95 guidance for EPS next year. Now, when we find out the result of this process that we've been in, we will provide an update on what the earnings per share impact could be. We're hopeful that we are closing that acquisition. If we do not close it, we will increase earnings per share guidance, at least for that isolated element of EPS in 2026, and we would talk about what the amount is when the time comes.
Robbie.
Thanks. Robbie Marcus, JP Morgan. Bernard, you spend significantly more than anyone else on structural heart, and we were talking about this last night. You're starting to see on TAVR a little bit of separation. Edwards starting to gain share. You're taking the majority of market growth in mitral repair. You're splitting the market in tricuspid right now, and you still have a repair product to come. So how are you thinking about Edwards' investment versus opportunity versus competitors over the next, not just 1 year, but 3-5 years? Is there still a substantial amount of separation yet to come from all the innovation that you're putting through? We saw the Innovation Center last night. How are you thinking about that?
Clearly, we want to bring best innovation and providing high-quality support to the clinicians to treat their patient the best they can. This could result in some share gain, but it is not, our priority. We like it. We enjoy it. Our priority is truly about serving large unmet patient needs. I talk about, this many unaddressed patient group, where here, we have an opportunity to, again, create new markets, to, again, pioneer, therapy for these, many patients. And I think I talk about, 6 to 7. This is going to represent multi-year of growth. So for sure, because we are so committed to innovation, our innovation are usually highly differentiated. They bring value also to the entire healthcare system, including, taxpayer and shareholders. But in my mind, the uniqueness of our strategy is to be able to tackle this large, growing, unaddressed patient population, where we can increase the number of patients we are going to help in the next 5 to 10 years. So this is what you are going to see from us. And I'm glad you start feeling it. We feel it. This is what I said earlier this morning. I don't believe we have been in such position in a long time with so many catalysts, so many new therapies, where we are pioneering things in addition of having great technologies.
Joanne.
Thank you for taking the question, and I think I can still say good morning. I want to just confirm the dilution from JenaValve is a dime. I think that's what it originally was supposed to be. Is that what you have dialed in for 26?
No, we didn't announce what the potential dilution could be. Last year, when we talked about the potential impact of JenaValve, we said for half the year it would look like 5 to 10 cents. So if you were to extrapolate that and say, well, for the full year, if we were to close on January 1st, that would look like 10 to 20 cents. That's a big range. And we're not sure if, when we do get approved, if we're going to close on date X or date Y, which is why we have some assumptions in that 280 to 295, but we are not quantifying them at this point. Again, once we learn the decision, we'll provide more information about what the impact of that acquisition will be.
Thank you for that. And then my real question has to do with the NCD, which it looks like it's quite specific. You expect it at the end of 2026. What are the steps to that? Because I know many people in this room will be tracking that and expectations for it. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll take it. So the very first thing is they have to open it. They have to reopen, the CMS has to reopen it publicly, and then it goes into 2 phases of public commentary period, right? So as soon as it is opened, there's the first phase of public commentary period, and then they close that period, and then it goes into another phase where they announce a draft of the NCD, and then it gets reopened for public commentary, right? And then it closes again, and then they announce the final. And that process is variable, and it can take typically, up to 12 months. Sometimes it's been a little bit earlier than that, and sometimes it takes longer depending on if data is required or there's more controversy. So, that's the typical period. That's what we put into our assumption. So, assuming that it follows the normal process, which we definitively think it should, then the sooner it opens, then the sooner it closes, and that's why we think that it's sort of towards the end of next year. It's a high priority. We know that. It's been communicated that it's a high priority for them, but timing is uncertain. The staff at CMS is stretched, and there's a lot going on with the political environment, but we know that it's a high priority, so we're looking forward to opening as soon as possible.
Chris. Thanks. Chris Pasquale, Nephron. Bernard, on your growth catalyst slide, you had aortic regurgitation out in the 28 and beyond category. I'm curious how that sort of squares with the idea that you guys still expect to close the JenaValve deal. Is that 28 and beyond based solely on Sojourn, or does that assume that Trilogy could be a commercializable product?
No, it's what I wanted to represent is not necessarily, especially when it is a completely new therapy, not necessarily when we are going to start treating patients, but more about when we are going to start feeling an impact of Edwards' top line. And so it is why, let's assume, we close, JenaValve in 2026. 2027 will be a year of, obviously, acceleration, fixing a number of things, starting, bringing this, to patients. The true impact to revenue, we will start to feel it in 2028 and beyond. So I want it to be very balanced in the impact of a catalyst, especially when it is completely new. When it is a new technology, it is different. Let's say you have Pascal TR, for instance. At the time of launch, we are going to feel it. So it depends what's existing, and what's new.
Larry.
Keep pushing.
Harder. Got it. Thank you. Thanks, Chris. Larry Biegelsen, Wells Fargo. Thanks for taking the question. So, Dan, I wanted to ask about X4. Just if you could please talk about the improvements you're making to the valve and the delivery system. Any color on the additional clinical data? And it looks like you're still expecting approval in 2027, from what I can tell from the slides. Can you comment on that, please?
Yeah, we don't know when we're expecting approval because we haven't laid out a approval pathway yet. We've closed the Alliance trial, completed enrollment at the very end of last year, and that's going under clinical follow-up now. It's a 1-year endpoint, right? So we're kind of haven't worked through the data of that yet. But this is, we're so excited about X4. I mean, it is a complete game changer and a very different platform, to S3 with this variable sizing feature, and has the real opportunity to change how we personalize valve sizing to patients. And we bring a lot of other features, which physicians are quite excited about. But you learn the most when you get into clinic, right? And when we go into clinic in clinical trial, and this time with the Alliance trial, we've got engineers there, we've got clinical specialists there, and we're seeing with our own eyes what is happening with the device. And this is where the innovation process really accelerates. We've set a really, really high bar with S3, and that gets higher with S3 UR. And so when the engineers have come back and said, hey, I think we could do this, I think we could do that, which they do all the time, then it comes down to a decision. Are you freezing something, or are you adding those sorts of things? Do you want it in next generation device or in your first generation? We've decided to take a couple of elements which we think are quite meaningful and sort of put them into the first generation X4 device. Because it's a completely new platform, we're probably going to have to get more data on that to satisfy FDA, et cetera. And so we're planning to do that in 2026, and hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you.
Matt.
Thanks so much, Matt Miksic, Barclays. Question for Dan, maybe Bernard. It's a question that we get often from investors, and I find we talk to clinicians on early TAVR. There's kind of like a pretty stark disagreement in the community, it feels like, and so it's confusing. I think when we talk to someone who says, like, this is great, we think this is like in line with your view, in line with our view, this is going to move adoption forward and penetration, and other folks just don't seem as, and I don't know if it's because they're busy, academic centers or whatever it is, they just don't seem to be as positive about what it means to growth. And I just was hoping you could maybe tease out the differences and why it's important for some clinicians and centers and maybe viewed as less important for others. Thanks.
Thank you. So let me start, and Dan can provide additional comments. I would say that's typical. We are used to it. Each time we are pioneering something new, you have two camps, at least. The believer and the one who are still looking in the rear mirror. And asymptomatic is not a device-to-device trial. It is a disease trial. And so it's very, remember, all of you are very deep into what we do as a company, correct? Remember TAVR 20 years ago. Remember, so it's like, it is tough for people all of them, to be behind it. There is a time to change current belief. Now, with that, Dan, you can share a little bit more about what we learned for this TAVR.
I guess with hindsight, we experienced a little of this with all of our historical indications as well. I remember a huge debate about whether there were really any intermediate risk patients. What is intermediate risk, and what's the color around that, and how do you really identify that? And the STS score was the only way to do that, but that kept changing as the percentage of surgical patients, because that's a real-time score, right? That updates, and as more TAVR procedures being done, then that becomes irrelevant. So I can understand at the point of care there's debate. We feel really bullish about the opportunity, that's for sure. But it is a different indication, right? Like I said before, this is not an indication that typically gets referred, typically gets treated by a surgeon, or typically, this is now entering real upstream in the referring pathway, right? The whole dogma of watchful waiting and waiting for symptoms is being kind of blown up in real time. And so the education pathway, like I've been saying before, the democratization of that upstream will take some time, right? But we're already seeing the changes and the impact of the data on how TAVR is being performed in all severe aortic stenosis patients. And so I think the way that we look at it, and I think we've been saying this fairly consistently, and it will be the same for moderate, there is no expectation of a light switch on our end, right? What we do anticipate, though, is constant positive contribution to market access, to patient access, and to market growth over the mid to long term. And these layers, they build on each other, and as the data gets stronger, and as we have these debates, and as more evidence is presented, whether it be clinical or economic, then we start to see this coming. Well, one thing that I will also add, right now it's so difficult in the United States, and we get our best data in the United States, is the current NCD for TAVR does not cover asymptomatic patients. And so there really is no incentive for anyone to code a patient. So we get real difficulty. We have real difficulty truly understanding what is happening in the clinical practice. But with that change, we might see more color on that. But again, I don't expect it to be a light switch. I expect this to take some time. And that's what's exciting about the growth opportunity, not just on the short term, but over the long term.
And let me add, one fact here. For me, one leading indicator is the fact that ESC changed the guidelines. ESC is a very conservative body. Usually, they are lagging what's happening in the US. And here, they change the guidelines. They are pioneer behind the ESC guidelines. They are deep into the data. That's, for me, the best leading indicator.
Danielle.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for doing this. Dan, this question is for you. So at TCT, we saw the preview trial, and I thought that was pretty interesting. And I'm wondering, maybe give us a sense of how you guys are thinking about that and the underdiagnosis of patients, and maybe talk a little bit about what you guys are doing in the field to try to help there.
Thanks, Danielle. Yeah, the preview trial and that study is super interesting, and I think brings a completely different lens to the prevalence and incidence of the disease to the patients. And when I say a different lens, most of our previous understanding of, and I'm going to speak on behalf of aortic stenosis, but I think it's also true for mitral and tricuspid disease as well, is from what we understand from diagnosed patients, right? So you see what's happening in system, patients who have been diagnosed through echo, and you make assumptions from there. Whereas this study went about it completely different, and it looked at the lens of out-of-system patients, so excluding in-system patients and looking and trying to discover who out there who is not known end up having disease. So we get a better understanding of the out-of-system opportunity. When you correlate those two datas, particularly for aortic stenosis, it's right in line with what our predictions were, right, across the board. And so when we looked at that data, I have to admit I had to get my pencil out and carry the one and do a whole bunch of math that you do every day. It's not my strong point. That's why we have great colleagues like Scott and everyone else. But yeah, AI, right? But when you do it, it lines up, really quite nicely with what our previous understanding was. From the severe disease perspective, potentially, we may have been a little bit conservative, but not much. I mean, it's right in range there. And so I think it's a complementary data set. And so it's always nice when something like that comes out and kind of confirms how we should look at the market.
I think I'll just add on to that and even say that, it was across all the disease sets we saw that. And it was kind of cool for a lot of us. We're like, wow, it's not just aortic stenosis. It was all of our, and our models are worse for tricuspid and mitral, are not as well studied as aortic stenosis. But we saw that there are large groups of these people. They're underdiagnosed. And so if you think about the efforts that Dan and his group have been doing to help inpatients people get diagnosed to move through the system, and it's the same that we'd be doing for mitral tricuspid as we move forward, it just lines up with the things we were already thinking, that there's a big opportunity here.
Marie.
I'm Marie Thibault, BTIG. I think my question is in implantable heart failure for Diane. Wanted to just understand what your team has been doing to help build the Cordella patient referral pathway, making sure patients move through that workflow well. And also, can you educate me on patient segmentation for VLAT versus the Cordella product? Who's best for which product?
Thanks for the question, Marie. For us, this past 12 months has really been a foundation building year for the business. And we have been really deliberate about focusing in for Cordella with an early user experience and beginning to hire a modest sales force to really go out and understand the sales process. We look forward to moving into 2026 for our next stage of commercialization. What I can tell you is we have brought on board a tremendously experienced cardiovascular sales force and clinical team that really understands how to build markets. Through them, we're focused on building the foundation for our future commercialization stage. With regards to VLAP, we're excited about this technology. Surely it shows the commitment that Edwards has to the space, bringing on a second technology in implantable heart failure management. The team is highly talented, and we're excited about seeing the progress they make as they are enrolling in their studies currently in U.S. and Europe. It's time for us to really understand the patients that will benefit from one technology versus the other.
To maybe respond to your question about segmentation, it is too early. What you have seen this morning from Todd's presentation, we do believe that pressure management is going to be very important. Pressure management together with putting the patient at the center of their care. Direct pressure management with VLAP is probably differentiated. It is still early. We have a vision, we have a strategy, but it is so early, we cannot talk about patient segmentation right now.
Rick. I just want to start, Mark, with a quick observation. I've noticed over the years that everybody gets applause here. Every divisional guy gets applause. Even the CEO gets applause. But the CFO never gets applause. Since this is maybe it's something about the forecast.
That's so thoughtful. The other thing that you don't get, I don't get a walk-up video or a walk-up song. So thanks for.
But this is the last one, so I figured we should do a little something. Anyway, I just want to say thank you personally for these amazing, 12 years or something like that. It really is great. It's been great. My question really is for Daveen. Daveen, gosh, I see these slides. It's breathtaking. It really is. It's impressive. It's exciting. It's even thrilling. But Marty threw you under the bus last night and said we shouldn't care about it because it's hard. It's going to take forever. Or maybe he was being rude to Ben by saying TAVR's easy. I don't know. Talk to us about the reception you're getting to this full portfolio, amazing pipeline from doctors, and are people embracing your Envision enthusiastically, or is it just too early in the product evolution game to see that kind of excitement? Just help us understand what you're seeing and feeling and thinking.
No, thanks so much for the question. It was a great comment Marty made about mitral tricuspid, saying, hey, it's probably going to be a little bit slower than TAVR. Fair enough, right? And so I'll probably answer a couple of ways. If you look at first from a technology standpoint, right? Think about the early days of TAVR, and you compare that original SAPIEN to what we see with when we got to SAPIEN 3, SAPIEN 3U. We, Edwards, along working with physicians, made a lot of improvements to both the product as well as the procedure together to get to where we are today. That makes the case so much more efficient with fantastic outcomes. I expect that with many of these new therapies for unaddressed patient groups, mitral replacement, tricuspid replacement, and even with TEER, we're going to be going through those same evolutions in the future years, right? If you think about PASCAL, we've been on the market 4 years, and we're already in our 4th iteration. Our next iteration of EVOQUE's coming, our next iteration of M3, and we haven't even launched M3 in the U.S. So there's a part of technology iteration I talked about in that therapy development of kind of that Edwards does, as well as the procedural innovations. I think those are all kind of important to know where the procedure can go to help bring up that curve. Secondarily, I think your question about the portfolio, I'm starting to see that people see that Edwards really believes in the mitral and tricuspid patient, that it is more, the patients are more diverse in their anatomies and clinical presentations than TAVR. As a result, you do need multiple different therapies to kind of treat it. And I see more and more physicians, especially now as we start bringing multiple therapies out, see that vision that, wow, Edwards is understanding it. I can treat more patients, and that's causing a point of wanting to work with us on both and treating more patients. I mentioned as I'm seeing that right now with tricuspid in Europe, where we've had both therapies now for a couple of years. I see that kind of buildup, and I see the kind of growth in treatment and more patients have the opportunity and more people wanting to build up with us. And I think we're starting to see that already in the U.S., where we've got that first, Pascal mitral. We brought in Evoque, still for the tricuspid, different, but people start to see our strategy. They know that M3 is coming. They're starting to talk more with us. They know Pascal tricuspid is coming. They're starting to talk more with us. So yeah, I respect Marty's opinion on the pace, right? I think the pace has these kinds of constraints of technology procedure, but the opportunity is big. The technologies are getting better, and the portfolio is coming out to really help optimize care. And we'll keep this over for the long haul. This is not a short-term one-hit wonder. This is a continued growth in helping patients out. I'm excited for this.
Maybe if I could just add something before you do. I laughed a little bit because he had two existential moments in TAVR. The first was the unblinding of the Partner B trial, which was 2011. And then the second one was Partner 3, low risk, which was 8 years later. Right? And so, 11 to 19, also we forget the journey that it takes, but that kind of made me giggle a little bit. But Bernard, you wanted to add?
Yeah, no, I will add maybe two things. One is we are alone. We are pioneering things here. So we are bringing technology, science, educating, bringing physicians with us. It's not like a field with 10 competitors, right? We are alone with this portfolio. So when you pioneer things, it takes time. The beauty is you are the leader. You educate people, like we did for TAVR. Then, when I look at numbers, numbers are lagging indicator, but nevertheless, we all like numbers here. TAVR is going to end the year like $500 million plus, growing 50%. It's not too bad. Next year, 7 something, growing 40. Not too bad. So we always want what. So it's why I look at these two things, and I think it is important. And this is why Daveen and his team are putting so much focus on elevating the innovation across the board. Next gen Pascal, next gen Evoque, next gen M3, and all of the science behind it, to make sure that even if we are alone, we elevate this space and the care for so many patients.
Matt.
Hi, Matt Taylor from Jefferies. So I wanted to ask a couple related questions on capacity. Seems like that's been less of an issue than it was 2 years ago, and with this NCD coming up, if all goes as planned, I was wondering if you thought we could add 100, 300 centers. So what's a reasonable number of centers that could be added over time with a down the middle NCD? What's the most bullish case, and what's the current state of capacity?
So I'll start with, first of all, you got to do a bunch of assumptions and predictions on what the NCD is actually going to be before you can answer the other question. So it will depend on what the operator requirements are, what the hospital requirements are, what the mandates are in terms of surgeons or not, or other specialty being in the room. So all those sorts of things could go in a number of different directions. So it's really hard, to predict. But assuming that there is, and if you look at the most recent NCDs, which suggest that the pathway that CMS is taking is to simplify those requirements from an NCD perspective, then clearly there will be an opportunity to add centers. The way that we're looking at it, we don't think that the big opportunity is in adding centers, although there will be an opportunity there. But the biggest opportunity will be in the efficiency of existing centers, right? The capacity that is created within the existing centers that do TAVR today that enables them to treat patients more effectively and expand their own access. We believe that that is going to create a bigger opportunity than perhaps adding. To add new centers, and we have to apply a lot of muscle, right? A lot of muscle, bring them up right. They're going to be lower in volume. They're going to have to go through their path. That's an investment, et cetera. And again, like I said, it is an opportunity, but not as big as what the efficiency gain would be at the point of care of existing centers. Second.
It's crunch time, Matt. We got to keep this moving. Jason.
Just maybe for Scott, you're showing about 100 basis points of R&D leverage in 25 and in 26. Where does R&D ultimately settle? Like, is there a minimum level of R&D investment as a percent of sales that allows you to sustain 10% top line growth? And I guess similar question, the 50 to 100 basis points of up margin each year going forward, is that largely from R&D?
So second part of your question, part of the 50 to 100 basis point margin expansion is from R&D. It will depend upon the year in terms of whether the expansion is coming from R&D or other operating expenses, SG&A. So it's something that we're going to be flexible and nimble as we're managing. In terms of where R&D as a percentage of sales settles out, similar story. We need to make decisions as we go along about where the opportunities lie. Remember, the number one objective for our investments at Edwards Lifesciences is to fuel top-line, organic, sustainable sales growth. And so if we have an opportunity, as we have had during the growth of TMTT, to put the pedal to the metal and increase R&D as a percentage of sales in order to drive top-line growth, we'll do that. Right now, based upon what we see, we do expect R&D as a percentage of sales to decline for some period of time, even as we continue to grow our spending in R&D. So the answer is we don't have a specific target, but we do anticipate that it will continue to go down even as we spend more.
Rich.
Hi. Can you hear me? Yeah. Thanks. Rich Newerder, Truist Securities. On TAVR AR, I'm just curious, about having kind of the two-valve strategy, and obviously there are some regulatory considerations to that. But just let's say you end up with them both. Is there anything in the valve design, the target market differentiation? Just what's the strategy there, and how do you use those two in concert?
Yeah. Thanks for the question. Like I mentioned in the presentation, is we think the best approach for they're two different types of technologies, and it's such early stage with this disease state that we think that best approach from a strategy perspective is to run hard at both, right? Because it gives us the broadest patient population to go after. Obviously, JenaValve is closer to approval, right? So you get to learn faster with that in clinic, whereas with JC it'd take a little bit longer, to get to approval. But that's really the only difference in terms of it's not a matter of if it lands or it doesn't land. The only question would be is like, okay, what is the timing to commercialization? But the strategy remains the same. And the opportunity is we like the approach of putting our expertise against both these technologies to run hard to treat the broadest amount of patients. And that's kind of the high level at a strategy perspective. I don't know if you want to add anything, Bernard.
No, you're well said that. We have a clear strategy, to pioneer this. There are many patients, different anatomy, complex anatomy. The two values, they complement each other. And we like that. So we are hopeful we can close JenaValve in Q1.
Peter.
Hey there, Peter Chickering, Deutsche Bank. A question for Daveen. When you talk to centers that were enrolled in the TRISCEND trial, have those centers scaled up the EVOQUE volumes as expected? And more importantly, what's the feedback on how the hospitals and doctors want to invest in growing volumes due to the economics of doing EVOQUE?
No, great question. Thanks for that. So if you look at first from the centers that were in TRISCEND-2, yes, of course, many of them did scale up and are scaling up. And so we're both, we started off initially by focusing on those clinical trial centers. They had the experience. We started opening up then other high volume. People have already invested in tricuspid. And then you start working on the next volume of centers that are investing in tricuspid. And it's just a natural kind of progression. And as you imagine, if you look at different physicians and different centers, there's that normal scale of different amounts of volumes and growth across them all. But what I think a little bit what you see about, first on the procedure, is that the procedure continues to improve. And we saw that a little bit from that real-world STS data. For those centers who are in TRISCEND-2 versus the real world, you start already getting more efficient. You start getting better safety outcomes, as we showed, and they're just figuring out pathways of tricuspid. Because I mentioned this is a new pathway. And so that care pathway, referrals coming in, working through the hospital system, it doesn't happen as fast as you think it does. It takes time. And it happens gradually, and it's constantly improving, and it will constantly get better. And that's very normal for a new disease state. So probably, nothing special there, but continuous improvement. In terms of economics, right, in the U.S., you're reimbursed by your DRG, and you have a new technology add-on payment that's underway. And so in general, if you look at hospitals and the cost of the procedures then, which includes device and procedure, and you look at the reimbursement, they're kind of doing okay. The whole point of the NTAP system is your incremental payment, assuming you set it up or charge for it right, gives you about the same amount of profitability that you would have on other procedures in that same reimbursement code. So in theory, for many hospitals, while there's always little tweaks up and down, you're making enough money to cover those procedures. So for us, I don't see the reimbursement, the actual reimbursement when you take the base case plus the new technology add-on payment being a hindrance right now to kind of doing more patients. They're not saying, oh, I got to slow down. No, you're doing okay. You're doing the same as every other structural heart. It's more about continuously to work through the pathways and improve that way.
Josh?
Thanks. Josh Jennings from TD Cowen. Wanted to just ask about TAVR competition. Your current commercial competitors and some emerging competitors have focused over the years on SAPIEN hemodynamics impacting durability. That clearly did not play out in the 7-year PARTNER 3 results that were presented at TCT. As you move forward into next generation valves, including X4, and then the next generation after that, is one of the top priorities improving hemodynamics for the SAPIEN platform? And anything you can share just from the Alliance trial in terms of hemodynamics for X4 or some of this potential engineering optimization? Is that a focus point, or does the PARTNER 3 7-year data kind of demonstrate that hemodynamics of SAPIEN do not impact durability, or will we have that final determination at the 10-year mark? Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Josh. I think we've always believed that hemodynamics does not equal durability. Durability equals durability, right? So, first of all, hemodynamics is important, right? And the true measure of hemodynamics, not a measure of velocity and then converting it. And so the valve design can really change what a hemodynamic, especially if it's done transhoracically, right? Like if you're doing a transthoracic echo to measure, a gradient, there's a lot of assumptions that go into the formula there, and there's an error related to that. And so we've always thought that, like, okay, if you're going to use hemodynamics to make a treatment decision, because either there is something clinically going on there or you have a concern, then you take the time to do an invasive hemodynamic check to really check whether you have a hemodynamic problem. There's a whole debate about this in the clinical community about the discordance of hemodynamics, right? And I think the PARTNER 3 data and other data have come out and shown that, the durability of our platform is quite spectacular. Now, we also noticed with S3UR, as we did on our surgical platform, nobody was really paying attention at that time, but now people are paying attention, is that there is a hemodynamic improvement with the RESILIA tissue, right? The way that the RESILIA tissue is, the way that it opens, the way that it behaves, has a positive effect on that. It is not our primary concern, right? We like our platform. We like our durability. we have big things to go after. We are thinking a lot more strategically around lifetime management and what the patient needs are of the future and the physician needs are of the future in terms of the procedure, upstream, downstream, post-operatively, rather than what our competition is doing.
So I'm going to maybe just sneak in one more because, Ed, you've traveled a long way for this, so I want to make sure you get a question in here. Last one.
Thank you, Ed, for today. Rothschild & Co, Redburn. Daveen, you spoke to the learnings from the European experience with SAPIEN M3. You just go into a bit more detail on that. Maybe what's been good, but also perhaps what you are going to do slightly differently when you got the US launch. And then also if you can give us any updated color on the number of sites you are in Europe now.
Yeah, so in Europe right now, we're kind of scaling in line with our expectations. And we're still pretty early, right? It's a couple of months in. We're opening up new centers. It's starting with kind of those key partners that work with us and continue to expand to more of those key partners. So it's definitely early in the journey. So we've been definitely very pleased with the outcomes, right? Physicians are seeing that this is a group of patients with SAPIEN M3 who, again, are, by indication, TEER or surgical unsuitable. So the group of patients who, man, I wasn't going to get a great TEER result or didn't make sense for surgery. And they're a good chunk of those patients. And we're still, as we talked a little bit last night, we're still trying to figure out how large that group is, but we believe it's a reasonably large group with, who have not been treated and have been undertreated over the years. And so for us with SAPIEN M3, I think people are actually kind of excited that when you start a case, especially with the docking situation, you kind of have a situation where, hey, even if it's a difficult case, I can always pull away from the case and walk away and no harm, no foul to the patient because it's a challenging patient. So I think people really enjoy that about that. And so I think part of those learnings are just that as we apply to the U.S., that there's this inherent kind of safety belt. And when you put the dock in, you really you can always pull back and pull the catheter out and leave nothing in the patient because the dock's always kind of retrievable to the very end. And once you get the dock in, you're always going to basically get the valve in because the valve is a SAPIEN valve and the dock, you're able to get that in. So I think that kind of learning is probably one of the key learnings for the U.S. For us and just a very specific one. But when we launch in the U.S., it's going to be similar to Europe where it's a very deliberate approach. We're opening up centers, starting with our clinical partners, just like we did with Evoque. And we continue to see that this group of patients without a great solution are getting the solution. And there's some patients that are applicable for this technology. We were talking about this last night. There's some that you don't have a large enough new LVOT and some that are okay, right? And so there's a great number of those patients. And I'm excited to see those ENCIRCLE trial results, though. And to me, that's actually the most exciting part of this, where we can eliminate MR in these patients. We can really improve their quality of life. And we can do so very, very safely. And I think that's what physicians in the U.S. are kind of excited about for this patient group. We're really finding a new patient group that we have a solution for.
Bernard, maybe I'll turn it back over to you for some closing comments, and then we'll show the patient video.
Yeah. So I believe what you have seen this morning, we like the special company we are. We have been very successful. We are set to expand, being able to treat more patients, to deliver differentiated performance. So we care a lot about who we are as a company. We have a big impact to patients. We have a big impact to society, and we value a lot the fact that you care about us. Many of you came, from the East Coast, for a half-a-day meeting. Many of you online also, spend the last 3 hours, to listen to the different presenters. I trust you leave excited and confident. Again, thank you so much for how you care and value, the company. We like always to end the meeting with what is the most important, the impact we are having on patient care. Thank you so much.